The Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee meeting will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Representatives Burns. Here. Shannon.
Present.
Green.
Present.
Rogers.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Pies. Zorn.
Here.
Paquette.
Here.
Bizot.
Here.
Begol.
Here.
And Preston.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We need a motion to approve and adopt the minutes from our last meeting. That is, motion is made by Rep. Rogers, and seeing no objection, the minutes are approved. We need a motion to excuse Representative Pies. That motion is made by Rep. Hill, and hearing no objection, Rep. Pies is excused. So today we're going to be taking up testimony on House Bills 4382 and 4383. We have sponsors of the bill, as well as Stacy Hassong from the Drain Commissioners Association, or the Association of County Drain Commissioners. Make sure that that's correct. Here to testify as well, and I'd like to invite both Rep. Morse and Stacy to the table here, and you can begin when you're ready. I'd like for you to go through your entire presentation, and then we'll leave time for questions at the end, as soon as we have all that information. So thank you, and you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for allowing us time today to present on House Bills 4382 and 4383. This package is of personal interest to me. When I first took office here in 2021, I met with Dina Bosworth of the Michigan Association of Counties, and we spoke about my goal of creating or helping to further a tool that could be used by local communities to address issues that arise with flooding. As a Kalamazoo County Commissioner from 2019 to 2020, I sat on the Texas Township Flooding Task Force, which was created to address the record flooding that occurred in Texas Township starting in 2018. This flooding was a slow-moving disaster, first impacting 2 bowl lakes and later the surrounding neighborhoods not on the lakes. This flooding was a result of record-high groundwater and precipitation that destroyed around 20 homes, made multiple local roads impassable for many months, and caused many millions of dollars worth of damages to homeowners in the process of trying to save their homes. At the time, and as we sit here today, there was no state solution to help our residents with this unprecedented situation. The township created the task force to find solutions and frankly had to make it up as they went along. As I said, this type of flooding is not the norm for disaster relief. They were ultimately able to find a short-term solution to dewater the lakes and are still working through the long-term solution of a drain project. Through this process, I met Stacy Hassong, in my opinion, the state's authority on the drain code. Fortunately, Dina and Stacy had already been working on ideas to update the drain code, which are the bills before you today. House Bill 4383 provides local governments with state authority to create water management programs through a petition process filed with the Drain Commissioner. A water management board would be created alongside the program, the members of which are outlined in the bill. The new language of the Drain Code allows a water management program up to the size of a watershed to be created. The ability to manage our watersheds at that level is critical to planning for our future climate issues, as well as responding to emergencies of more local nature. Notably, the Drain Code was originally written in 1956 and has barely been updated since. It is well past time to modernize the language and provide our local municipalities and drain commissioners with the tools they need to address emergencies and the climate issues of the future. And with that, I will turn it over to Stacy Hassong.
Thank you, and thank you for your time and attention. Who knew in your first 6 months in this committee you get to talk about drains and drain commissioners twice already, you lucky folks. And Dina and I have met with a number of you to go over some of the reasons why we put together this legislation, and Representative Passat and Representative Paquette got to hear some of this last year. And so I'm going to give a quick overview of what we've already talked about and then spend more time this afternoon focusing on what those tools might look like, and then a 10,000-foot view of the process, rather than going through line by line of this. And again, I mentioned if you'd like to, go to sleep easier tonight, then you can feel free to read the specifics of it, but give you kind of an overview. So, as I had mentioned to you in our meetings, there's really a compounding effect that makes it very difficult for drain commissioners to deal with the problems that our state is facing just with the drain code as it's written today. As we talked about the last time we met as a committee I met as a committee with you, many of our drains were established in the 1800s and early 1900s, and so they're over a century old and were designed for the landscape that existed at that time. So not only are they old, but they're often undersized for what we have as the development today. And as I explained to you, it can be extremely expensive to update and improve these drains in these areas. And we talked about record rain events and how rain events are changing in terms of our climate. We are seeing a number of what the engineers call microburst, intense quick storm events that instead of having a nice slow rain over a couple of days, we're getting a summer's worth of rain in 3 hours. And our systems are not set up for that. And so that increased intensity of storm events, puts further stress on this aging infrastructure that we have. And then there's the continuing development in areas, and new developments put stress on our existing drains, and everyone wants a walkout basement, and those are hard to keep dry. And so that again puts more pressure on our drains. And then the Great Lakes and the rising groundwater levels that Representative Morris talked about, we depend on infiltration, and when we have high groundwater levels, that's not possible. That means we're seeing more water go into our drains more quickly. And then in periods where there are high levels in the Great Lakes, and I know they're experiencing that in Lake Superior right now, then that serves as the outlet for the vast majority of our drains. If they're high, then it makes it more difficult for our drainage to work as effectively as it should. And then the loss of wetlands, that was storage that was depended on to hold the water and let the water go more slowly to the drains. With the loss of millions of acres of wetlands in our state, which was necessary for the economic development and agriculture that we have in this state, we've also lost our storage. Again, stressing the drainage system that we have and making it very difficult for drain commissioners. So to give you an idea of what I talked about, I know you remember every word of when I was here last time, and I told you that the Capitol was this area was under like 3 feet of water before we built the Capitol. And so this map kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about with it's challenging to keep Michigan dry, is that these are hydric soils for where we're sitting today. When I say hydric soils, that means they were former wetlands, or they have basically the type of soil that a wetland would have, making it very, very difficult to keep dry, to keep drained. And so many of our buildings and streets are on these lands. It's a constant challenge to keep this dry and to keep our road infrastructure dry, to let it be sustainable. Macomb County, boy, I look at this and I say, wow, look at the stress that it is to keep constant drainage in these types of communities. And if you go on the internet and Google hydric soils in your county or your district, you'll see maps very similar to this. It is a continuous challenge to keep good drainage in our state. We are the Great Lakes state. We have a lot of water. We have unique challenges to other states. We chose to live here. I'm proud to live here, but these are the things that we have to deal with that are unique to us. So now we're going to talk about what it looks like when you flood. I've had my basement flood. It was one of the most stressful events of my life, of my family's life. This is a photo from Grosse Pointe. Again, we're talking about the Macomb County area with basement flooding. It is overwhelming to have happen to you. And it can happen everywhere, and very costly and time-consuming to have to deal with this. This is in Detroit from a 2021 storm event. This happens all over the state. This picture's from the Chaddock Drain in Laketon Township in Muskegon County. I was at a hearing with these property owners in this district where they testified that they had to keep a kayak at the side of the road to kayak to their house. They couldn't use their bathroom. They had to have a porta-john for 3 months. They were in tears testifying, and they can't sell their house because you have to report that your house is flooded to try to sell it. And so they're stuck. Representative Burns' district, the infamous North Branch Ecorse Creek drain, that has flooding all of the time. And again, it wreaks havoc on the infrastructure, the roads, the sanitary sewer systems, and people's homes, lawns. This is a picture of the jock drain in the city of Taylor. Again, just the type of flooding that we see. This is from, this is not necessarily a huge storm event. Some of these happens, like in North Branch of Ecorse Creek with Representative Burns' district. A 1-inch rain could cause that type of flooding in that area. This is from the McKinstry drain over in Canton Township and Van Buren Township. And if you look closely, these are all the different houses running temporary pumps with lines to the drain, kind of to try to keep their basements wet or dry from the flooding. Unfortunately, it's kind of a circular situation because the drain is so overextended in terms of its capacity that it's not possible to do in this circumstance. Here's a picture from the Detroit News in Dearborn Heights from 2019, and the caption said, "Dearborn Heights firefighters rescue members of the Clifton family from their flooded home along Courier Street in Dearborn Heights," and this is from May 1st, 2019. So drainage impacts not only residents, but it impacts all kinds of public service and utilities when something happens, and so that's important to remember. And then I just look at this photo and I think of how traumatic that must be for that family and that child to go through that. UP is not exempt from flooding. This is a picture from 2018 from Houghton County, but they had their share of flooding problems this year. Also, when you have a lot of snow and it all melts in a very short period of time, that's something that as drain commissioners we always deal with. To have a rain event on snow is catastrophic. I could list the days that happens in the lower peninsula because we have flooding, and I get calls to my office and the drain commissioners gets calls to theirs. Midland was not the only community that was devastated by the flood in 2019 in that area. This is in Iosco County, where there was multitudes of damage in addition to the dam failure. This is this year in Big Rapids. This is this year at the campus of Michigan State University. It's not just in years when we have these major storm events. This happens every year throughout our state. This is in Kalamazoo County. We got this photo from WWM-TV this year, not in the years that Representative Morris was talking about, this year. This is in Eaton County. It's overwhelming to sit in public hearings like I do. I've been doing this for 27 years. I know I started when I was 12. I've been doing this for 27 years, and I've seen property owners in tears saying they have to take off work when the meteorologist says it's going to rain because they're afraid they're going to flood. The anxiety that's involved is unbelievable. This can happen to us at any time. Rain is in the forecast for the weekend. We don't know when this will happen again, but it's time we start doing more about it. It's not going to get any better, and it's not just in these major flood events. Ask Representative Burns. It can happen just from a small rain event in some areas. Right over at Waverly Road, they can't take a one-year storm event without flooding in those subdivisions. So why can't we just fix all of this with the drain code that we have? Well, there are a number of reasons. The cost of drain improvements are very high, and to make a pipe bigger is costly. So to deal with some of the flooding on Waverly Road, which won't even deal with the particular flooding on certain subdivision streets, we're proposing a project that might be $50 to $90 million for a very small district to get the pipe big enough to deal with it. Permitting is an issue. 100 years ago, we didn't have to deal with permits. There was no Clean Water Act, there was no Inland Lakes and Streams Act, no Wetlands Act. That has made our water better by having these regulations and required permitting, but it has also made it more difficult to make drains bigger, wider, deeper, which is the only tool, or one of the only tools we have in our toolbox. And the biggest challenge that we have that I've spoken to you about is under the current drain code, we can't manage water throughout the entire watershed. We can only perform work on drains. It is time for this state to manage water rather than to just try and drain it as quickly as possible. So we need new tools in our toolbox. I think I've talked to you, as Representative Morris mentioned, we haven't had a major recodification of the drain code since 1956. That's our toolbox. That's like working on a 2023 Tesla with a toolbox from 1956, and I have a hammer and some baling wire, and you're asking me to keep it moving. It's hard to do. So here's some of the tools that we would like to be able to use throughout the watershed. Regional detention basins, rain gardens, roadside infiltration, and buffer strips. These are some examples. There are many more that could be instituted or discussed depending on whether it's an urban area or an agricultural area, but I'm going to just go through a couple of these examples. So regional detention. What the purpose of regional detention is to collect and store water and then release it slowly to the drain. And that has a lot of benefits. It keeps the water course from being flashy, going up and down as quickly, which prevents erosion in the water course. It also allows some of the pollutants and sediments to settle in the detention basin so it doesn't get into our waterways. And it doesn't have to look like an ugly pond with a big fence around it. We have successfully done regional detention basins that can be used as dry basins and use them as parks and soccer fields in dry situations, and then they're used only for storm events. They could look like a wetland or a natural area, and we can coordinate with local communities to make them part of the community when they're not needed for storm events. This basin is in Washtenaw County, and then we have an already constructed basin in Eaton County with the Carrier Creek. Regional detention is good because it can not only help out with the current drainage issues, but it can also prepare for future development. A regional detention basin like this is more effective than many, many small detention basins, and so it can be used as a planning tool and not only to address the problems that we already have. Buffer strips. Okay, so you're gonna go home for dinner tonight and you're gonna talk about, I learned all about buffer strips. What these are basically a strip of special grasses. When I say special, just long-rooted grasses that are between a farm field or a parking lot or what have you, between that and the drain. And so this photo is with one side with a buffer strip and one side without. That little strip makes all the difference in the world. It traps sediments, it traps phosphorus, it traps nitrogen, and it slows down the water, making the drain need much less maintenance and has tremendous water quality benefits. These make a big difference. We can put these on established county drains, but we don't have jurisdiction over the many agricultural private ditches that it is possible to work with the local agricultural community to install these. That would make a tremendous difference to some of our inland lakes. Rain gardens. Here's kind of a profile of how a rain garden works, and you can tell it's a profile submitted by an attorney and not by an engineer because it's pretty looking. But basically what they do is they help trap the water, slow it down, give it a chance for all those pollutants to drop, and puts less pressure on the drain once it gets to it. And so this is kind of what a profile of one looks like. And then here's a couple of examples in Kent County at a wastewater treatment plant. These can be installed right now only along a drain under the drain code, but not throughout the entire watershed. We need these throughout the entire watershed. Some cities have installed these on their city streets, but we really need them in townships and other neighborhoods where it's appropriate for that community. I'm not saying it's appropriate for every community and every town, but this is a tool that is much needed in our toolbox. And then Roadside infiltration, I think it's important to talk about road drainage because I work for drain commissioners, but I hear a lot about roadside ditches as well. The general public forgets that MDOT and the road commissions only have the responsibility to drain their roads and their highways and not everybody's drainage. But most communities, most subdivisions use the roadside drainage as the outlet for their storm drains, and it's unsustainable to depend on MDOT and the road commission to handle everyone's drainage in the state and not just their own. So this is a best management practice that can be utilized in communities where we don't want to establish all the roadside ditches as drains, but we can implement some of these to help take the pressure off the road commission, the MDOT, and the drains once it gets to it. And this is an example of the green number 4 drain in Ingham County, so it doesn't look too bad. This is much less expensive, as is a rain garden, than building bigger pipes, making rivers bigger, doing all those types of things, and it has significantly better water quality aspects of it as well. I've talked to many of you about detention basins. So before the 1980s, you don't see a lot of subdivisions built with detention basins holding their water. That just wasn't something we required as a state or as local government. Then you started seeing them more, and for a period of 20 years or so, they were built, but no local governmental entity took jurisdiction over them. And so once the developer left, unless there was a very active homeowners association, nothing happened to them. This is an example of a detention basin that nobody did anything with in Kent County. Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm picking on you a lot today. When there's nobody there to take care of them. I call them orphans because no one has jurisdiction to deal with them. Chapter 20 could be a tool to take some of the infrastructure we already have, but nobody has jurisdiction over, and clean them up. Property owner education is also a tool in the Chapter 22 toolbox. People want to do the right thing, but they may not know what the right thing to do is on their own property based on their watershed. If you give people information, I think there's people in this room who would be happy to do some things on their own property if they knew what to do and how to do it. Chapter 22 is an opportunity to provide that type of information that's very specific to their watershed to help them do that. And then finally, assisting with stormwater ordinances and reviews. I work for about 60 different county drain offices, and the law firm that I work with works for over 100 different townships. And I'm amazed throughout the state at how few townships and cities have stormwater ordinances to try to prevent some of these problems. And I think, and if they do, they're sometimes cookie cutter and not designed to the specifics of their watershed. And that's very important. We're a very different state, and so the same ordinance does not work. And I think it's not because they don't want to. I think they lack the expertise and the funding to be able to do that. So that would be another tool in the Chapter 22 toolbox, is to assist the local municipalities with ordinances and stormwater reviews that are specific to the needs of their watershed. So these are the types of activities that would be possible, amongst others, in Chapter 22. So now getting down to the process. And thank you for hanging in here with me. We're going to get through the process now. So the key points of this legislation are to take the pressure off the drains, and hopefully with enough best management practices, it will reduce the number of drain projects that are necessary. It's drafted to complement and not replace the other chapters of the drain code. As popular as the drain code is, the rest of the chapters would remain in place as they are. There would be more involvement than other chapters of the drain code from local units into the decision-making process, and we'll talk about that more specifically in a minute, especially in watersheds that are in just one county. And then again, increasing the planning by the local units with ordinances and reviews. We have what we have right now in terms of development in our landscape, and so we need to address what we have, but also try to prevent problems in the future and not let this continue to get worse. So the first step is a petition. And so what I mean by that is The whole state is not going to have Chapter 22 water management districts. It's only by petition, only when a community is ready to do it. And it would be by the highest threshold for petitions you'll find in the drain code, 50 property owners or at least 2 local units of government would have to petition. And so if you don't have that, and if there is the locals don't want to see that happen, then there will be no petition and it's not used. There is one exception to the 50 property owners. If it's a tiny watershed, it might be slightly lower than that, but the normal number is 50. So let's say there's a petition. I'm going to pick on you, Mr. Chair. I always do. Grand Rapids Township, City of Grand Rapids. Let's use that as the example. If that's an intra-county drain, so that means, or water management program, that means they're dealing with a watershed just in those 2 municipalities, not involving another county. Then there would be a board made up of Ken Yonker as the drain commissioner would serve as the chair, and then the city would appoint a board member and the township would appoint a board member. So for that district, it would be a 3-member board. If we were in Representative Burns' district and there was a Chapter 22 for the North Branch of Ecorse Creek, there'd be about a dozen members of that board because every municipality, City of Taylor, Romulus, Dearborn Heights would each have a member on that as well as the drain commissioner. So the number would be dependent on the number of municipalities in the watershed. That would serve as the board that administers the Chapter 22 program by majority vote. With intercounties, it gets a little bit more complicated because this is a bigger watershed. What I mean by an intercounty district is a watershed that impacts more than one county. So let's look at Holland is in 2 counties, Allegan County and Ottawa County. If we were dealing with Lake Makatawa, it would be an intercounty watershed. And so there's a 2-pronged process there. There would be a commission and a board. So the commission is the board. Let's start with the commission would be the drain commissioner from each county, the county board of commissioners chair and finance chair from each county, and the chair of that commission would be from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. That board, so with that county, it would be 7 members. If it was just the 2 counties, would decide necessity, that we'll talk about in a minute. And then it would switch for the day-to-day scope decisions, sending out notices, all that stuff, back to a board like we had at the intra-county level where it would be just the drain commissioner from each county and MDARD. If you're enthralled with this, I can give you a lot more information in a deeper dive, but that's how that would work. So we have our commission for an intercounty watershed or our board for the intra-county watershed. I'm going to keep with Representative Fitzgerald because he loves when I do that. And we have Grand Rapids Township appoint someone, the drain commissioner, City of Grand Rapids appoint someone, and we have a necessity hearing. At that means we got a petition, we know what the watershed is, we send notices out to every property owner and municipality in that watershed, and we invite them to a public hearing to help the board determine, should we do something? Is a water management program necessary for the public health, convenience, or welfare? Do we have drainage problems? Do we have flooding problems? Do we have water quality problems? And that board would vote by a majority vote, yes or no, we should or we shouldn't. So if one municipality isn't on board, that doesn't throw the whole thing off. It would depend on how the drain commissioner would vote in that situation. It is not unanimous, but it's by majority. If it is decided not necessary, we stop. There is no program. That is very possible. If the communities decide it's not a good idea, or we don't think this is automatically, we don't hear enough public input that we have a problem, they can vote no, we stop. If it is necessary, then the board for each intercounty or the intra-county would develop a plan based on the specific needs of the watershed. That plan, so they would retain a consultant. That could be an environmental consultant, an engineering firm. It could be a watershed council. that has experience with these types of plans to put something together. If there are specific needs in a watershed, an advisory committee can be appointed to assist. It might be environmental justice issues. It might be specific agricultural issues. It's very dependent on that watershed. And the board would put together a proposed plan. Within the plan, it would make recommendations and specific for that watershed, and then it would give proposals for different activities that could assist the watershed with its issues. Each activity is required to include a proposed cost. So that board votes yes, and in Grand Rapids and Grand Rapids Township, we have an issue. We're going to deal with it. And so the consultant or the watershed council, whoever's retained, says there's 7 items we think you should do. We think we should have property owner education. We think we need some rain gardens. We need some regional detention. We need to update everybody's stormwater ordinances. Maybe some parking lots retrofitted for best management practices and green infrastructure. And here's the cost of each. After that's performed, the board submits that onto the website and takes public comment for at least 30 days. They receive the public comment, and then they can modify the plan, accept the plan, or reject the plan based on the public comment. Then, after that, they can vote to approve the plan, modify and then approve the plan, or reject the plan. If they reject the plan, then the petition is dismissed and the costs are assessed to the district, and we're done. We don't do anything other than we have a plan. If the community decides after getting all this together, this is just too expensive, even though we said, yes, we need something, if all of this is too expensive and we don't want to do it, we want to put it aside, they can vote no and do nothing still. So it's not a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen. If they say, yes, we accept the plan, then they can go from that a la carte menu of those activities that I talked about and select 0, 1, or all of them to institute. Some of them might be non-construction activities like ordinances and property owner education. Some of them might be construction activities. So they get to decide. They would adopt the program and then select the activities and then submit an order saying this is what we're going to do. This is what we're taking jurisdiction over. The order, if there's 2 counties involved, would split the cost between the 2 counties, like we do for inter-county drains. Then there would be a computation of costs. How much is this going to cost? So the cost of the plan, and then the cost of each of the activities that were selected. And there would be advertising for bids for the construction portions of it and that computation of costs prepared, much like we'd have for drains. Then the drain commissioner would put together an apportionment of benefits. Apportionment of benefits is very similar, in fact, to the drain code. There are other chapters of the drain code. MDOT would pay part for its contribution based on benefit to state highways. The county and road commissions based on their benefit to county roads. Townships, cities, and villages based on public health and municipal streets. And then the property owners based on the land in the district. Again, the same manner as the drain code, based on benefit. And there is a definition of benefit in Chapter 22. The advantage to public corporations, the inhabitants of public corporations or property that results from a water management program, including but not limited to a benefit as a result of contribution of stormwater, or a benefit from the elimination of water conditions that jeopardize the public health, safety, or welfare. So all properties are not equal in this regard. We're going to look at acreage, but we're going to also look at the type of land use. More impervious surface, meaning more parking lot, rooftop, driveways, the more drainage stress it puts on per acre than something like agricultural property that allows for absorption. So it will be different based on the situation. And so properties would be liable for an assessment. The stormwater is public, dealing with stormwater is public infrastructure. It is a public utility, but people in the state of Michigan are not used to paying for it. They're used to paying for their sanitary sewer systems. They're used to paying for their drinking water, but I know they are not used to paying for stormwater, but we have to manage our stormwater if we are going to continue to have dry roads and try to have dry basements. So, after the assessments and the apportionments are determined, there is a day of review of apportionments with the drain commissioner, where a notice is sent out, and there would be appeals as in the same manner as other chapters of the drain code. We've talked to the Michigan Townships Association and are agreeable to having a longer appeal period for assessments than we have in the other chapters of the drain code for this. That is not in the current legislation, but the Michigan Association of County Drain Commissioners would be willing to agree to that amendment. And then assessments could be levied for up to a 30-year period to ensure the affordability if it was a big project. Again, a plan could come forth that's only property owner education and helping with stormwater ordinances and maybe a small rain garden, or it could be something extensive if it's a large watershed. It's going to vary dramatically depending on the specific needs of that watershed. And when there are no costs, there are no assessments. So not everybody in the state's going to receive an assessment, only where there's a program that's been found necessary with activities that have been shown to the public and approved. And then, unlike our orphan detention basins that we've talked about, once we build something, we need to take care of it. And so there would be continuing assessments when needed for the maintenance and operations. And then, let's say one more time with that 7 items, we picked 3. It worked so well, the community wants to go back and do one more. We would go through that petition process to add another one as long as it was consistent with the plan. And with that, I thank you for your patience, and I'd be willing to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Stacy. That was a deep dive, and I appreciate that as we continue or begin to level set on the bills and their intent. I do have one question regarding the formation of these boards. One thing that I don't know if it's inherent to who is on the board or what their position is within these municipalities or counties, but is there a term associated with how long those members are on the board? I saw that there are times where, one person from one municipality or one per municipality is serving on that board. Is there a term of service? Is this a 2-year term, a 4-year term? I mean, if we're talking about an up to 30-year assessment, is that something that is considered?
So there is not a term in the statute. It would be up to, I'm going to use your example again, Grand Rapids Township and the city of Grand Rapids. They would appoint a person. They can put a term on that for them to decide, and then whoever is the elected drain commissioner, the electorate decides that term.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I have a question from Rep. Rogers.
Thank you. Bear with me. I have several questions because this affects our county. But I first want to thank the bill sponsors very much for bringing this forward. I think I saw Representative Vanderwall as well as thank you, Rep. Morse, for testifying. This has been very stressful in the last few years, affecting my county or my family directly in our county. And I've heard ad nauseum about this from my parents talking to me about it every day as it was ongoing. And it really is stressful when people are going through it. And thank you for showing some of the pictures, because I think that really gets to some of the crux of how this has really upended and uprooted people's lives. So thank you, Stacy, for your testimony as well. A couple of questions. Can you mentioned that one slide on benefit. Can you talk about public corporations? That sounds kind of strange to me in this context. Can you talk a little bit more about what public corporations means?
Sure. So it would be very similar to the other chapters of the drain code. So MDOT for county or for state highways, I think that's pretty set. The county for benefit to county roads. And then for city streets, village roads, village streets. And then for townships, cities, and villages, it would be an at-large assessment for the benefit to public health. And what that apportionment is going to differ county by county, district by district. They vary widely under the drain code right now. So I know, as an example, in Representative Burns' district, the at-large assessments, because it's a huge district, the one that we talk about is like 1%. But in other districts where the municipalities are willing to pay more or asked to pay more, then it's significantly higher.
Thank you. Another question I had is, in the makeup of these commissions, you reference a county board finance chair. Kalamazoo County does not have a county board finance chair. Is that like a controller?
So it would be a member of the whatever committee serves as, and I think in the bill, there's some language that says if there's no finance committee, then it's, I forget the wording, but a different committee chair.
Okay. Are these commissions also subject to FOIA and Open Meetings Acts?
Yes. So each district would be a municipal entity in and of itself. So any special assessments levied just go to that district, and like other drainage district are bound by OMA and FOIA.
Okay. And I think you answered my bigger question in your presentation, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. One, I guess, based on the makeup of the board, it describes how an individual appointed by the Drain Commissioner of each affected county who must be an elected official or their designee. Does that mean that the person that is the designee doesn't have to be elected?
So
This board?
I wanna be clear. So for an intra-county drain, so that would be, the designee would be selected by the municipality, not the drain commissioner, for an intra-county drain, and that's up to the city, township, or village who they select. It does not have to be a member of their board. They can just designate someone. When we get to the language, and I know there's a slide back here, there's an exception for counties with over 1 million in population. And I think this involves, and if Representative Pies was here, she could talk about it, because it involves Oakland, Macomb counties, where the drain commissioners each pick an additional designee above and beyond the county board members and the drain commissioners to sit on that board. It's just the million population exception that is included in that, and it does not have to be an elected official.
Okay, so
I know that was a really complicated answer, and I apologize.
well, that's why I like to break it down in the back and forth. Appreciate you. I live in the watershed map that goes from Berrien County, where my district is, Cass and Berrien, all the way over to Hillsdale County. And so, if this, some non-elected officials, MDARD chair is not an elected person, from my constituents, if these individuals come up with a plan that raises the assessments on my constituents, how would I guess, communicate to them that some non-elected people are raising their assessments for projects maybe 100 miles away from them?
All right, and so first I want to say that the watershed is not defined, so it can be as small as within one township to deal with an inland lake, or it could be multiple counties. And so we don't have set watershed sizes. It's just a decision as to what that community wants to tackle in terms of the size of a water management district. So
you guys sent out a map, and I have a watershed boundary that goes from Hillsdale County to Berrien.
yeah,
This
so
is
that's
last year's.
that's a larger watershed, but you also have, as an example, in Berrien County, over 900 smaller watersheds that have established county drains involved in those. And so any one of those at a smaller basis could have a Chapter 22 plan, or if you had the political will to do a big one like that, that would include multiple counties, then I would imagine that there's going to be, Hillsdale County is going to wonder why are they paying for something in Berrien County, as well as vice versa. And so there would have to be a majority of people agreeing to have something done. I'm not sure. It depends on the situation,
I was
whether it
saying
would
if
be
that
that big or
happened,
not.
If that happened,
Yeah.
and
And
the
so-
political will were there, which I would foresee that
So-
happening,
so-
how would you communicate?
Okay, so
to
in
my
that
constituents.
situation, let's say it's what you said, Hillsdale, Cass, St. Joe, and Berrien. Did I get that right? I'm trying to remember my Southwest
The
Michigan.
34 watershed: Berrien, Cass, Van Buren, Kalamazoo, St. Joseph
Okay.
Branch, Hillsdale.
So on that commission, it would be huge to decide whether we even do a plan.
And it's under 1 million people as well.
Yeah. would be the elected drain commissioner from each of those counties, the elected chair of each of the county board of commissioners, and another elected member of the county
Or their
board of
designee.
commissioners. No, for those, it would have to be those people. So it would have to be the elected county board chair, another elected county board of commissioner, and the drain commissioner. It's only the designee when we get into that counties with more than 1 million people language, I believe. Then MDARD serving as the chair to vote on that. So you would have to get a majority of all of those elected officials and all of those counties to agree to even move forward, to even, order a plan be prepared. And then after the plan is prepared, then you would have the drain commissioner from each of those counties along with MDARD get down to the specifics of it. And there would be ample opportunity both at the necessity hearing and at meetings to go over the plan that was put on the website for your constituents to voice their opinion to their elected official that they don't want this to happen or that it's too expensive. Great question, thank you.
And I'm sure that you'd be happy to sit down and work through that with any member of the committee to understand
Absolutely.
exactly what
I could talk about this
intra
for
or
weeks,
inter-county, and yeah, appreciate the question though. Thank you, Representative. Representative Hill.
Thank you. I wanted to bring some relevant data perhaps from the UP where, as you might know, we had a state emergency declaration in April or May with the first snow melt. We had a very rapid snow melt this year. The governor came up, we declared an emergency in 6 counties. Request was made to FEMA for the replacement. A lot of it was local roads, so township level government and county, some county level government because it's townships. Road commissions assessed drains. A lot of drains got blown out with the amount of water that came through so quickly. We submitted for $30 million to FEMA. FEMA came out to assess, and this is only initial and it's not final, but the initial request that came back as authorized was $8 million. So the need for this is immediate. And then there was an appeals process, but what I also learned in that was FEMA will replace to the same size that was there, but now that we know that there's going to be bigger rain events, you can also appeal to FEMA for the bigger drain, which they may or may not decide to do. So again, the need for this mechanism is very immediate. My questions were, what about commercial forest land, which has a special tax status, and how that's addressed? Because a lot of my areas are commercial forest land, as well as federal and state forested lands. And how is there any difference there and how that's handled? Thank you.
So, thank you, Representative Hill. I know that you have a background in watershed management, so it's a delight to be able to talk to you about these issues. In terms of state and federal forest land under the drain code, those are exempt, although we are hoping to work with the DNR to have them assist in helping to pay for our drainage issues where they have properties. And so, get ready for that. And then in terms of other commercial forest areas, this would be a special assessment, and I'm not familiar with the commercial property tax implications, but it's a special assessment, and so they would be assessed based on their type of land use. So forests would have probably a lower factor per acre than your commercial sector, but they would still, based on my understanding without the specific knowledge of those tax implications, be are required to pay for their contribution.
Thank you. Representative Breen.
Thank you. This is a lot, like a lot.
Yep.
And I fully understand the need to update parts of the drain code, but this is like a rewrite.
Of
Oakland
one
County-
chapter.
We have a water resources commissioner, Jim Nash. He does a fantastic job. I absolutely understand the need where you've got different jurisdictions that need to work together. So, between different counties. And perhaps I'm just need to wrap my brain around this, but I'm wondering why the Water Resources Commissioner, if it's simply within an own county, wouldn't have the authority to engage in certain projects or do a lot of the things you're talking about here. And also, what would happen, just as an example, if a board and a commissioner don't agree on a plan?
All right, I'm going to tackle the easy one, the last one you said, which is what if they don't agree on a plan? It would be majority vote. And so if there's a 3-member board, 2 of the 3 have to come to an agreement, just like we have for any local government action. You have to have a majority agree on a motion to approve something. And so if we can't get a majority to agree, then nothing happens until they do. With regard to why can't we just have the Drain Commissioner do this or Water Resources Commissioner do this now? Because they don't have jurisdiction unless it's established as part of the drain itself. So let's take the Midland Dam situation. The Tittabawassee River is not a drain. I don't think anybody wants it to be established as a drain, but it would be great to build detention, to put storage in, to take the stress off those dams in that river within that watershed. You can't do that under the drain code because it's not a drain, but we could do that under Chapter 22. As an example, I talked about the Macataw River watershed. We would really like to see, I would really like to see perhaps buffer strips on ditches that aren't county drains. I don't think anybody in that community, including the Water Resources Commissioner in Ottawa County, wants to take all of those over as county drains. We don't have jurisdiction to implement best management practices unless it's part of the drain. That's why. Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you. For today, I have one final question for you. You talk about there being little to none updates to the drain code since 1956.
Yep.
So we're approaching 70 years.
Yep.
That this has remained dormant. I understand that there's a need to modernize and to look at what tools are available to our drain commissioners. But my question would be, what has brought us to this moment and why now? Because it seems like there are some alarming situations and some alarming moments of water infiltrating. I mean, we had slides and slides of water where it shouldn't be. So why now? And is this something that could be phased, or is a rewrite the only way to do this?
Great question. I'm going to emphasize this is not a rewrite of the drain code. This is one chapter.
Of this
There's
chapter,
26
correct.
chapters. When I was brand new to the practice of law, the legislature tried to rewrite the drain code, and there was over 100 hours of committee hearings on it, and no one could agree, and it didn't get changed. So there's been dozens and dozens of amendments since 1956, but no rewrite. Because it's difficult to do, because people can't agree, and so we've kept it the way it is. And so why now? We're really not that old as a state or as a community. This has only been in place 150 years, but look at what our landscape was 150 years ago compared to now. The subdivision in that time frame is kind of a recent, pardon the pun, development in our state's infrastructure as an example. And so you can only take something and stress it so much before it's too much. And we're getting to the point where that's the case. We have only had the environmental regulations that are in place in my lifetime. I'm lucky to, I won't say how old I am, but boy, it's only been 50 some years that we've had those in place. And so where before I think I told this committee, I have pictures from a magazine that the Allegan County Drain Commissioner had where dynamite was the best way to clean drains, and let's just go do that. Well, you can't do that today. 50 years ago you could. And so things have changed, and our residents are demanding good roads. Our residents are demanding that their basements don't flood. Our residents are demanding clean water. And so we've got to the point now where we have to take action.
Chair, and I would add that why now? It's like, it's well overdue. I mean, and the fact is climate change is happening, and we can't ignore it. And it's really long past time to give our communities tools to be able to address these situations, not just emergencies, which is all we do now, and they have to make it up. We as a state haven't given them the tools to even deal with emergencies, let alone planning for the future and the climate change and the continued weather pattern change that means flooding in so many areas. So, I would argue it's well past due versus not just right now.
Thank you. And thank you both for being here today. Thank you for your detailed testimony and your detailed presentation. Thank you to the members for your thoughtful questions. I do have some cards to read in regarding the bill. I do not believe I have anyone wishing to speak. In support of the bill, I have Almika Steele from the Wayne County Drain Commissioner, again, supports the bill. Rich Bowman from the Nature Conservancy supports the bill. Mike Campanoni from the Michigan Water Environmental Association supports the bill. With regard to opposing the bill, we have Don Crandall from the Home Builders Association of Michigan. We have Tim Langholt from NFIB opposing the bill. We have Brad Ward from the Michigan Realtors not wishing to speak and opposing the bill. And finally, not wishing to speak and neutral on the issue is Ben Terrell from the Michigan Farm Bureau. With that, thank you all for your time. You are dismissed. And with there being no further business before this committee, we stand adjourned.